Hello and welcome to Bread and Rosaries, the UK Christian Left podcast that is launching itself into 2026 with some really bad vibes. I'm Ben Molyneux-Headington and I'm joined today by Adam Spears. Adam, is today's main topic the worst thing you've subjected yourself to for this podcast?
I did watch the National Conservative
that's
a while ago. Yeah.
Well,
I do just sort of end up watching a lot of really awful right-wing YouTube videos for this. So,
gun to your head, which was worse, the conference or this?
The conference had Calvin Robinson at it.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair shout.
Who I recently discovered is, I think, the spokesperson for UKIP now.
Yes, I think I saw something like this. Have you seen UKIP's recent rebrand?
It's a bit on the nose, isn't it?
It's not the Iron Cross. They're getting very upset when everyone says, "Hey, you guys, that just appears to be the Iron Cross you've got now." It's something really funny about how UKIP still exists, and I have to say something very socialist about a weird organisation, like husk of an organisation, continuing to exist after all the kind of main people and impetus behind it departed elsewhere. Right, like that's the sort of thing that is more common in the left of Britain than it is on the right. But yeah,
I think once you get to the far right, it becomes a lot more common. I mean, technically, I think the National Front still exists. So
yeah, true. Well, good luck to UKIP, I say.
I'm frantically looking for the right thing to play on the soundboard, and I don't know. I mean, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, look. I assume that they've shifted badly to the right, but the interesting thing is, like, for a long time they were kind of, although everyone involved with them was a mad right-wing freak, like they were kind of such a single-issue party. At least in theory.
And actually, not everyone involved with them was super right-wing. I mean, look, there's a sense in which if you ally yourself, if you join a party with those kinds of people, like you can't. It doesn't really matter what you think in your head. You're still kind of just pushing that kind of nonsense. So, functionally, I guess you can say those people were right-wing as well. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they weren't. Most of them weren't quite Nazis like they are now. So, yeah.
But I suppose the difference is UKIP had a specific thing, which was bringing about leaving the EU. It got that, and it kind of lacks a raison d'etre now. You had the Brexit Party, but there was always a sense that was a one election only kind of influence thing, right? Like they were branding themselves the Brexit Party in order to try and get what they wanted out of that specific election. And then, there's been that rebrand to Reform that has obviously meant that it is much less of a single issue party, whereas UKIP is defined fundamentally by, what does it mean for the UK to be independent now we've left the EU? Because I'm certain they're not advocating for leaving NATO or getting off the teat of the American empire. So what is the independence in question here?
I don't know. Probably something to do with bendy bananas, I guess.
Wait, I can never remember. Are we meant to have bendy bananas or straight bananas?
I think the thing was that the EU apparently had a rule about
how bendy,
bananas not being too bendy or something. I don't know.
So I can't remember whether the EU insisted they were particularly bendy or.
I think they had to be straight. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It's bollocks either way. But
it's important to me that I know whether I should be buying the bendiest banana in the supermarket or the straightest banana. What is the most patriotic banana? That's the question I'm asking.
I don't know. One that's red, white, and blue. Hang on. No. Clearly, the most patriotic banana is this one.
And you, sir, are you waiting to receive my limp penis?
I can't believe you've left that on the soundboard after the last episode.
Staying on forever.
Rest in peace. Today, our main topic, if you haven't picked up already, is we're going to be talking about the Reformed Christian Fellowship that was launched at the end of last year. Adam has subjected himself into the full video of their launch event that was a church service, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, sadly.
Yeah. So, he has put himself through hell so that he's going to come back and report to the rest of us what that was like.
I've put myself in the place of Jesus in the harrowing of hell. That's yeah.
Well, except you haven't done any harrowing, and if you have, you shouldn't be bragging about it on the podcast like that.
It was harrowing for me, I can tell you.
But before we do that, let's start, as we always start, with what else is on my mind grapes.
What else is on my mind grapes?
And Adam, I hope that you brought something to Mind Grapes that is kind of encouraging, uplifting, positive in light of the unpleasant topic we've got for today.
Yeah, I actually have. If you are a member of GAFCON, you're not, are you, Ben?
No, they rejected my membership application.
Something that Labour still haven't done, right?
Yeah.
So the Church of England, I mean, most people will be aware by now, I think, that the Church of England have decided that, I think at the end of February, they're going to be winding up the Living in Love and Faith process and basically doing nothing. So they were instructed to work out how to introduce services of blessing for same-sex marriages and to allow clergy to still serve as clergy when they themselves were in same-sex marriages. And they have now decided, with a long, frankly, mealy-mouthed document, that they are not going to do any of that at all. And it really is. It's an astonishing document in one sense. I mean, it starts with a Philippians quote, "Do nothing from selfish ambitions or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves." And you know from opening with that passage what's going to come next, essentially. And it's never, as always, it is never those who are actually on some level oppressed who are the ones who have to the ones who aren't oppressed are the ones who get their own way every single time. The ones who are at the end of this nonsense are the ones who have to be told that they should do nothing from selfish ambition and they should have humility. And I just think, to be honest, opening it with that, it's a miss for me. It's pretty frankly awful because we know who it's aimed at when it comes down to it.
I think it also puts the lie to any suggestion that there was any sort of real democracy at process in the Church of England, right?
Yeah.
Because the bishops have just basically, there was a clear legislative process. Supposedly the Church of England is synodically governed, and the synods instructed the bishops to do something, and the bishops went, "No, you're right, mate. Yeah, no, thanks, I'm not interested." Which is, I think, something that should be unsurprising, but for it to be this blatant should be something that is more remarkable, I guess. It doesn't feel like there's been a kind of upswell of the shock and disgust that there is no actual accountability or democracy for bishops within the Church of England. They can, as they've now made clear, just do what they want.
That is true. But obviously, even within the House of Bishops, there are disagreements on this. But I think what they always end up doing is essentially deferring back to where they were before because they don't want to tread on the toes of the Conservatives. And I think we're so far past that at this point, or should be, that, I mean, GAFCON have split, right? Like, that ship has sailed, and the Church of England can't be making its decisions that are harming people on the basis that they might piss off some people that have already flounced off,
Yeah, absolutely. I had two observations that I took from the document. The first is that I did what I want to do when the Church of England puts out a statement, and I searched the word safeguard. Take one guess how many instances of the word safeguard I found in that.
It's probably in the minus numbers, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. 0 mentions of the concept of safeguarding. I look for protection, protect, anything that might relate to that. There is nothing there at all. There are 2 instances of the word safe, one of which is saying, oh, it'd be bad if people felt unsafe in our churches. There is no interest whatsoever in any safeguarding. And this is a safeguarding issue that they have abjectly failed to. It would be bad if they acknowledged it, there was a safeguarding issue at play here, but still chose to continue in the path they've chosen down. But they don't seem to even understand that there is any safeguarding issue here, that by not welcoming and affirming queer people, they are creating environments that harm people, particularly the vulnerable, particularly kids that are still trying to work out their own sexuality and gender identity. It is self-evidently for anyone who has any sort of understanding of safeguarding, a safeguarding issue, and for the bishops to seem to have no realisation or no will to acknowledge that is disgusting, even by the standards of Church of England bishops. If not surprising, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked, Ben.
Yeah.
I really am.
But we should be. That should be shocking. That should be shaming these people into resigning their posts. That's how serious a failing it is. But it won't, because despite Justin Welby quitting, they still have no interest in taking safeguarding seriously.
The thing is, I think in their heads they do.
Yeah.
But they're so not in that world. They're so, bear in mind, like most of the people who are making decisions in the Church of England come from a particular kind of background.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They haven't, most of them, by no means all, but most of them haven't really struggled. They don't really know what it is to, they can't necessarily empathize with those who, like with LGBTQIA plus people, because A, they generally speaking are not that themselves, and B, and this
or at least not openly. Who said that? Who said that there were closeted bishops in the Church of England? Some of whom clearly voted for this. I don't know.
There's something about, I think, particularly in the sort of conservative evangelical end of things, and arguably the sort of conservative Catholic end of things as well, but particularly the conservative evangelical thing, where you're brought up in a culture and you're taught in a culture that can't even often say the word gay, for example. You are same-sex attracted, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I think when you can't even use the accepted language on this stuff, when it's such a cultural taboo for you, there's so much work that needs to be done there. And if you're a young same-sex attracted person growing up in this culture,
fuck off.
Yeah, it's really hard to do that work on yourself. But yeah, so of course these people exist. But I think the point is the majority of the people making the decisions in the Church of England haven't had to struggle in this way. The majority of them haven't had to struggle in too many other ways either, because we're talking about a culturally middle to upper class group of people who have money, who are white overwhelmingly. They just have never experienced this stuff, and there's a sense in which I'm almost giving them a pass, and I don't intend to.
No. Because you and I both know posh older white people that have impeccable politics, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not as common, don't get me wrong, but it's not a get out of jail free card, right? We can acknowledge the kind of structural reasons why they might not see this stuff, but that doesn't get them off the hook morally for it at all.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Before we recorded, we were chatting briefly about whether we should do a whole episode on this, and who knows, we may yet. But one of the reasons that I was not sure about doing that is that essentially I think we've just spent 10 minutes saying a bunch of things we've already said 100 times about the Church of England, and it bears saying again. I think that's why we're talking about it. But in some ways, this is a whole lot of no news, even to the point where, I don't know if you saw this, but they said that of the entire House of Bishops or group of bishops, one person was opposed to this statement, 4 people abstained, everyone else voted for. So that means that, in all likelihood, even the bishop you think's great and you actually really like, still didn't bring themselves to vote against it, right?
Yeah, because there's even if they don't necessarily like it, they're always prioritizing trying to make sure that everyone's kept together and let's just smooth things over and we can't be smoothing things over anymore. We've got to have that fight. And it talks about having dialogue and debate and all the rest of it. But there comes a point where dialogue and debate aren't enough anymore, right? Like people they're expecting people to live their entire lives as someone they're not, right? And I think that's what's so unjust and disgusting about this, is that this affects real people on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's
shameful.
appalling.
Actually, shameful.
Yeah, I would like to leave this on a positive note, though, which is a footnote that I picked up on this near the start of this document. And you might think it's not particularly relevant, but I think it's very important. There is a bit where it talks about, as bishops we're called to love and serve the Church of England, set in a particular relationship to the people of England and the polity of the United Kingdom. And then there's a footnote that says, we acknowledge, of course, that the Diocese of Europe and another diocese own a different relationship to jurisdictions beyond England. And the other diocese is the Diocese of Sodor and Man. The Church of England have a diocese specifically related to the fictional country Thomas the Tank Engine is from. Sodor is not a real place. The Church of England are sending a priest to Thomas the Tank Engine. This is fantastic news. I saw that and had to Google. I was like, I swear Sodor is fictional. And it is. There is no island of Sodor.
Hang on. So I'm just looking this up now because okay, hang on. So I've got it. So the Norwegian Diocese of Sodor was formed in 1154, covering the Hebrides and other islands along the west coast of Scotland. So it's from the Old Norse. So, and the Isle of Man was included in these southern isles. So it looks like it's kind of just a holdover from that.
Except the Isle of Sodor and Man now just contains the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
And therefore presumably also includes the fictional island of Sodor. Which I think is fantastic. I want to be the priest that gets sent to Sodor.
There has been interesting stuff about the Diocese of Sodor and Man and whether it's going to sort of stay in the Church of England for various reasons. Because obviously it's a tiny diocese. And I think there are sort of some issues around how that's governed and disagreement and particularly with this issue as well. But I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what that is. But I think there have been sort of minor threats made for it to like leave the Church of England.
What, like join the Church of France? What is the...
is there a Church of France? Probably. There's probably something called the Church of France, isn't there? Yeah.
I have to imagine there's not a lot of French Anglicanism, right? Like, maybe I'm wrong.
No, but there are still Huguenot congregations worshipping in Anglican churches in this country. So, for example, Canterbury Cathedral has a French-speaking, like effectively Huguenot church that meets in one of its rooms in Canterbury Cathedral that has met since the Huguenots came over here.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate that. Like, that's a fantastic bit of trivia that there's still Huguenot congregations in the country. Well, I hope that was lighthearted. That's the only lightheartedness you'll get in this episode. Let's plunge further into the filth that we've chosen to deal with today. Adam, tell me, what have you dug up about the Reformed Christian Fellowship?
I think I came across this when I saw it on Facebook that there was some Reform nonsense, like a short video they'd made about the launching of the Reformed Christian Fellowship, and then interviewing various people afterwards. And Anne Widdecombe's talking about how wonderful it was. And I'm not going to try and do her voice, but she's got a very distinctive, like weird kind of almost frumpy frog kind of voice.
And with Anne Widdecombe doing this and Thomas Skinner coming out on LBC in support of reform, I think it's pretty clear to say now that Strictly Come Dancing is a tool of fascist normalisation. Like, you can't be watching that anymore. I'm afraid that is a show that exists to normalise fascists.
I always assumed it was, to be honest. I've not seen the episode, and I never will. Yeah, so anyway, this video, they interviewed a bunch of people, and Anne Widdecombe was one of them. And what I find interesting about that is Anne Widdecombe is a Catholic. And she became Catholic many years ago because basically the Church of England wasn't conservative enough for her. So she swam the Tiber, went off to Rome, and so on. One of you might remember this, I don't know. Do you remember the program? I think it was Goodness Gracious Me.
I know of it, but I don't think I've actually seen it.
So there was a program called Goodness Gracious Me. I think it was either in the late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. And it was it followed a sort of British Indian family, and the sort of running joke of it. So I think it was Sanjeev Bhaskar, Meera Syal, people like that who were in it. And the running joke, of course, was that this Indian family were trying their best to be the most British they could be. And actually there were two families that were competing against each other to be more British than that other British Indian family. And they did an episode where they went to church. I'm not sure why, probably for like a wedding or something, but they didn't really know what they were doing. And they went up for communion, and they took the wafers, and one of them at one point, so lots of jokes made about that, and one of them at one point put chutney on the wafer to make it more palatable to them.
That would help.
Yeah, well, except not if you're Anne Widdecombe. And indeed a few other people as well really took offence to this, because the way they see it is that the Eucharist is the most important act of Christian worship. It's a divine thing. And to her,
which,
that's
by the way, like is that fragment on its own. Sure, fine. I'm not sure I agree with it fully, but I think it's a totally reasonable position to hold as a Christian, right? Like,
so she had a problem with it, obviously, because to her that is the literal body of Christ,
right? Yeah.
So how can you put chutney on the literal body of Christ? And I'm like, well, I mean, you are eating the body of Christ,
Yeah,
so,
but also presumably. There was that they were pretending to do communion, right? I presume they didn't get an actual priest in
to communion,
do Eucharist for real, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Goodness Gracious Me was doing method acting. I don't.
Well, that particular episode received a bunch of complaints to Ofcom. Loads of a few celebrity and politician kind of.
And I think we've got to put a big old asterisk by the word celebrity there, don't we?
Look, she's been on Strictly Come Dancing, so
yeah, true. Well, yeah, but even then,
but those complaints were upheld.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not see that. I just assumed that was the classic, like, file it under S for Shredder situation. Like,
no, because it was seen as so offensive to Christians that it shouldn't air anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is the kind of person that we're dealing with. Someone who can't just, even if you're mildly offended by it, just chill out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she is now a sort of Reform Party wingnut, I guess.
I believe she's spokesperson for Christianity or something like that, isn't she? Like,
that figures. Yeah, that doesn't.
She has some sort of like ceremonial role, essentially, right?
Yeah, and she did one of the readings in the service as well. We're not gonna look at that clip, but she did one of the readings. Most of what we're looking at today is the sermon that was given by the vicar, whose name I have forgotten.
But this was in a legit Anglican church, right?
Yeah.
Which if you take Christianity seriously, as we attempt to sometimes, it is infinitely more offensive to me that these fucks would be in a Christian church, like doing Christian stuff while launching a reform thing, than anything, goodness gracious me, has ever done. Right? Like,
I mean, it was a Church of England church, so I think there are those who question whether it was really a Christian church in the first place. But
yeah, and there's two groups of us there. There's those like me who cover that from the right perspective, and those who cover it from a very different perspective.
Yeah, so they did this at St Michael's Cornhill Church in the City of London, and I guess we can start by talking about one of the things I sort of noticed immediately when I started watching this thing was the size of the choir, because a very impressive choir. I mean, it's always going to be any church in the City of London is going to have plenty of money in it. It's going to have a good organist and organ. It's going to be a very beautiful place, and the choir, the quality of the choir will be impeccable. The quality of the vicar, less so. But the thing that I first noticed was that there were not that many members of the choir, and I'm sort of wondering whether basically it was announced that they're going to have the launch of the Reformed Christian Fellowship and they need the choir for it, and whether half the choir's gone, I ain't fucking staying for that. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I think that choir would normally be bigger.
For you.
Okay.
Let me ask you about the ethnicity of the choir members, because if it was an all-white choir, it is entirely plausible that they simply asked all the non-white choir members not to show up for this one. It is reform, after all.
I would not be surprised. Let's have a quick look, because I don't actually know. Yeah, that's an all-white choir, I think. It certainly looks like an all-white choir from what I'm looking at. I mean, I'm missing someone.
This is pure speculation for me, but until the evidence is presented otherwise, I'm convinced that they just got all the non-white choir members not to come to this event, right? That is the simplest and most logically consistent explanation of what's happened here.
Well, I mean, yeah, maybe, but also, I think if I was a self-respecting choir member and I was anything other than white, obviously I wouldn't be caught. Well, also as a white person, I wouldn't be caught dead at the Reformed. Well, maybe I would, but I'd be like a fly on the wall kind of thing. Because there's a morbid curiosity to kind of move amongst these people in their natural habitats, and just sort of observe the weirdness. But the tricky thing with that is that you kind of end up being associated with them, so you don't want to be seen.
Although I have to say that you are a person that, like, I would describe you as like visually clearly not on the right.
Yeah.
I think if one of us was being sent to infiltrate right-wing Christianity, it wouldn't be you, would it? Like,
I think if I went bald, I would look very right-wing.
Interesting. As in, if you shaved your head?
Well, yeah, or just all my hair fell out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're right that if your hairline was like 3 inches further back, suddenly, your whole vibe would shift dramatically.
These are not right-wing glasses, though.
No, they're not, are they? No. So tell me more about the church where this was held.
The thing you can know straight away about any church in the City of London is that they're going to be filled with the kinds of people that you expect to frequent the City of London. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, because it's for those who don't understand, when we say the City of London, we don't mean what you think of as London, the city. We mean the specific area of London that is exclusively occupied by bankers and financial speculators and market traders, right? Like, it is the city is the financial hub of London. And it's to do with the fact historically there are actually two cities in London. There is the City of London, the City of Westminster. The City of London is kind of a specific district of London that is the financial hub, vying with downtown New York, right, as the two kind of major financial hubs of the world, actually.
Looking at this church specifically as well, it's an interesting church because it's a very kind of prayer book society kind of church. And what I mean by that is, so there's an organisation called the Prayer Book Society that are basically all about the Book of Common Prayer and maintaining its use and promoting its use in church and so on and so forth. Now, the interesting thing about the Book of Common Prayer is that people often associate it with sort of high church Anglicans, right? But actually, the Book of Common Prayer is a very Protestant book.
Yeah, right.
And so what you can find is there are churches like this that I don't think these are very. I don't think this is a very Catholic church. I think actually probably the clergy in it are probably evangelical. Probably the most of the people in it are evangelical. But this is a more traditional evangelical church.
Yeah. What you
that's something I think
as a dry evangelical, right?
Yeah,
very formal evangelicalism, perhaps, in terms of the style of service.
Yeah, and I think this is something that people need to realise, because people have this association these days of evangelicalism with the charismatic movement, and they're not the same thing, right? Evangelicalism is a style of theology, and charismatic movement has that as well, but it's not the same thing as evangelical theology, even though there is a lot of overlap between those two movements now. And often you find that the charismatic movement is actually something that you can spot more easily than you can evangelicalism, actually. So this seems to me, I haven't been to the church, but it seems to me to be sort of in the direction of a more evangelical church, and but in a very traditional kind of way, which actually is something you would expect being a church in the City of London.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And the prayer book thing's a funny one, where on the surface level, there's no inherent reason why being a prayer book church would make you hyper-conservative. But in practice, there's a very strong association between prayer book society and being extremely conservative. Not universal.
I don't know if I agree with you, actually, on that first point. Because I'm not saying that everyone who is into the prayer book, everyone who's into the prayer book society and all that kind of thing is like just inherently right wing. But the Book of Common Prayer, its positions, like it was written in a way to affirm the status quo, or rather to give precedence and power to the monarchy, to establish a kind of church that was established, i.e. a state church that was headed by the monarchy, right? So a lot of the way it's written, a lot of the things in it are kind of, I would argue, quite inherently right-wing things, at least right-wing coded. And so if that's what you're into, if that's your kind of worship, that you do, some people on a daily basis have a BCP service, if only a small sort of prayer service, that stuff rubs off. Right. And I think probably you're going to have a bit more of that kind of outlook. Not always the case. I've known plenty of people who are a bit more on the left, broadly speaking, who are very sort of BCP types.
Yeah. But I think there was, I think that's an interesting point to think about. Yeah. I guess my point was the Prayer Book Society positions itself as non-political, non-aligned. Its thing is just, we like the prayer book, you should use it more. And the politics of that are perhaps there, but not on the surface level, but are borne out by the reality, which is the vast majority of kind of prayer book churches are deeply conservative. But perhaps we're judging things a bit early, because we haven't even listened to the sermon yet. So maybe actually this is a liberal humanitarian church that's here to challenge reform. So Adam, do you want to take us through this sermon?
Okay, let's start with the first clip, shall we?
20 years ago, if we heard of somebody getting cancelled for hosting a Christmas event, perhaps we would assume we were reading George Orwell. Fast forward to 2025. Thankfully, we are far too tolerant to ban Christmas. Though I wonder how long before we're only allowed a decaffeinated, coffee-flavoured, oat milk version of the Nativity. Picture the scene. The Education Department has proposed a culturally sensitive rewrite. Avoid too many male-speaking roles. Consider turning the stable into a sustainable eco-dome. If including wise people from the East, watch out for cultural appropriation. Educate parents on the inappropriate gifts of times gone by. Gold and its link to colonial economic inequality. Incense and the environmental hazard it poses. As for myrrh, well, we recommend essential oils ethically sourced.
Okay, so first things first, the exact fucking accent you knew he was going to have.
Yeah. This guy is a self-parody.
Yeah. And like, I know that you and I have accents that some people will think are quite posh, but there are levels to this shit, and that is, exactly the accent you were expected to hear. Like, there was no amount of money I wouldn't bet that guy went to private school.
I think he probably did go to private school, but I think what's interesting is he hasn't got the most posh accent.
No,
he has a posh accent, but but you're right, because it's exactly the kind of accent you would expect to find in a church in the city of London.
Yes. Yeah, he's not
like,
landed
this
gentry.
Guy was probably a trader before he
exactly right. Yeah. And then, good God, the speed at which the Orwell mention was dropped is incredible. Like, that is world record speeds for dropping an Orwell reference in. And then so we all know, right, that a lot of priests are failed stand-up comedians, right? They get an opportunity to try out their material every week from a pulpit. But this was really like they're not even inviting you to the Saudi Comedy Festival, mate. You're not even getting to Riyadh with that stuff. Like,
and this guy totally would go to the Saudi Comedy Festival.
Yeah, he's probably a little gutted he wasn't invited. Yeah.
It's also interesting, like, how quickly he kind of lent into the cancel culture thing. And this is, as we're going to see, this is basically how his entire sermon is framed. He's going to talk about cancel culture a lot. And there's something just... Before you even get into the intricacies of that, I just find that kind of grubby, kind of gross, to frame all of this around cancel culture. And we'll see that he really doesn't even have a very good grasp of what cancel culture actually is.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's important to note that, like, he is literally doing this as his job, right? His job is that he is the priest at this church, and he is, as the priest in his church, endorsing a political party. Yeah. I'd get fired if I did that.
And playing to his audience very much so. Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Actually, you are notably uncancelled for doing this stuff. Like, most of us do not have the freedom to express our political opinions whilst acting as a representative of our job, right?
Yeah, I mean, as always, it's amazing how much people who are apparently cancelled get loads of airtime and sort of journalistic coverage that is not overwhelmingly negative. Some of it's negative, but that hardly amounts to cancelling.
Yeah. Also, do you feel like he ran out of steam with the three wise men gifts jokes? Like the last one where he was like, it's in a mode, recommend essential oils. There was no pizzazz to that. There was,
also, it was just like completely, it just didn't, it's not that it didn't make sense as such. It just wasn't really a joke. It was just
right.
All these lefties, they will think you should have essential oils and they should be ethically
crazy,
sourced.
Because of course you should. They're literally essential. Like, that's... And look,
also,
was that a bad joke? Yes, it was. Was it better than any of the shit he said? Also, yes.
Do you know what's really interesting about this, though, is that he is talking about essential oils as if they're like a left-coded thing.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like, I don't know what the British version of a MAGA mum is,
but
like...
It's very,
essential oils, like, yeah, there's some lefty types who are into them, fine, whatever. But like, there are loads of like sort of former like hippie type, hippie adjacent, like middle-aged people who are super into their essential oils and super into reform and you know, in America, like Trump.
Yeah, the fascist ex-hippie or like pseudo hippie or whatever you want to call it is absolutely an archetype. Yeah, I think he's possibly poking at the wrong audience there.
Yeah, you're not going to tell me that that Nadine Dorries isn't into essential oils.
Should we see if he gets any better?
For the next few moments, I want us to consider how that first Christmas shows us that the God of the Bible could not be more different. Of course, in many respects, God ought to cancel humanity. The story of the Old Testament is one of darkness, envy, exile, shameless suppression of the truth about our Creator. And yet the birth of Jesus Christ makes it clear it is still not curtains for humanity. With the birth of Jesus, it is as if God is saying, not be cancelled, but be cleansed. Not you are finished, but you can be forgiven. Not you are deleted, but you can be restored. Not I'm done with you, but I love you.
There's a lot in that, right?
Yeah.
But
I want to start by pointing out the speed at which it went from something quite funny where he said God should have cancelled us. Like, he's not intentionally funny, to be clear, to just rank anti-Semitism.
Right, so that was where I was going to start as well.
I was like, yeah, God should have cancelled humanity, you dickhead. Oh, no, we're really anti-Semitic. All right, cool.
Yeah. Just explain to those listening where that anti-Semitism was, because there might be one or two listening who that might have just blown over their head. But
so, I mean, this is a long-standing problem in Christianity, and it's only really in the last less than 100 years that it has become something we've been much more conscious of. It's also why theology has become on leaps and bounds in the last 100 years, less than that really, when Christian theologians were like, hey, I wonder if the Jewish theologians had anything interesting to say, given that we share like 2/3 of the Holy Book with them.
Interesting as well, though, that like it's clearly this hasn't filtered down to this guy, and often this stuff doesn't, like our theology, like the theology that's being done, doesn't filter down, not for a long time to the church.
But in short, the thing is that when you talk about the quote-unquote Old Testament, and listeners may well have picked up that we tend to refer to the Hebrew Bible rather than the Old Testament, but people know it's the Old Testament, right? What you have to remember about the Old Testament is that is the Jewish Holy Book.
Yeah.
And so anything you say about the Old Testament, quote unquote, you are essentially saying about Jewish people and the Jewish faith. So when you say that God was hidden, that the world was in darkness, that there was no redemption, there was no light in the Old Testament, you are essentially denying that Jewish people have any sort of experience of God, that they have any experience of I guess, light and positivity, and it's a huge problem in Christian theology. There is redemption in the Old Testament. Like, obviously, there is the ultimate redemption of Jesus Christ. That is what Christians believe, but it is not Old Testament bad, New Testament good, right? That is not the story. And it is both theologically dodgy to say that, but also it plays into this long tradition of essentially denying the relationship between Christianity and Judaism, right? And that is deeply embedded in the roots of anti-Semitism.
The literal quote from him is he says that the story of the Old Testament is one of darkness, envy, exile, shameless suppression of the truth about our Creator. Right? Not at any point does he say that there is anything counter to that there's a counter narrative in the Hebrew Bible, right? And there is consistently.
The point is that, when he says the story of the Old Testament, he's essentially saying the story of Judaism.
Yes.
right? That is what you've got to translate that to. I'm fascinated by the shameless suppression of the truth about our Creator. What does that mean? Who is suppressing what in his understanding of what he calls the Old Testament?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that perplexed me as well, because I wondered whether he was talking about the coming of Jesus there, but then that's too late, because of course people like him will see everything in the Hebrew Bible as pointing towards Jesus. Right, and that's an old, that's something that's been with Christianity from the start. Like, it's literally in the New Testament. It reads a lot of the Old Testament as pointing to Jesus, but actually, that's often not what was going on in the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, I really don't know, but maybe there's an argument for the fact that, again, he's playing to his audience, right? So, what kind of God does this audience want God to be?
One that doesn't like Jewish people very much, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Should we do one more, and then we might have to take a palate cleansing break for Saint of the Week?
Okay, very good.
Wonder if you spotted the second name. Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. This season of Advent, it keeps waiting on the agenda. Look back to the first coming of Jesus Christ, and we're strengthened, I hope, to keep waiting for the day when at last God's people will live together with their Lord. To cancel somebody is to say, I don't want you to exist in my life. Friends, the Bible says that is what humanity has always done with God. We don't want you in our lives. Advent, the perfect antidote. Friends, how much we need this season every year. Not so much the annual dose of tingle and tradition, as much as I'm a bit of a sucker for all of that. No, we need to be reminded our absolute dependence on God himself to save. When our hearts long to see somebody else get cancelled, well, so lays bare our own personal need for Mary's child, the one who came to be cancelled in our place.
Oh my God. Did he genuinely just say that Jesus was cancelled in our place?
Yeah, I know. I love that.
Oh, that is genuinely that is the sort of thing that you or I might say as a joke, kind of parodying the stupidity of like Jesus was cancelled in our place is such a world historically stupid thing to say, right? Like,
yeah, and also this is where. So I said before that he doesn't really know what cancelling is.
Yeah, and that's becoming increasingly clear.
Yeah. So he said that to cancel someone is to say, I don't want you to exist in my life.
Okay, would you like to hear my theory on that?
Go on in.
At least one of his children doesn't talk to him.
Oh. Yeah.
As soon as he said to cancel someone is to say, I don't want you to be a presence in my life, I was like, oh, you would definitely have at least one estranged child. That is so, it just went from it was like a pure revelation from that sentence alone. I was like, no question in my mind, one of your kids doesn't speak to you anymore. And most of what we're doing here is, you working that out.
And it's obviously there's something really quite sad about that.
Yeah. We're joking, but also that is deeply sad, and not in the sense that we think that kid has done anything wrong, but in the sense of it is sad that this person's mistaken and foolish beliefs have led to the estrangement of his own children. We assume, to be clear, we have no knowledge if that's happened, but
also,
reading between the lines.
Just as an aside, because in the last bit we talked about this guy. Do you know what this guy's name is?
No, go on.
This guy's name is the Reverend Henry Etoch Taylor.
Wow, that's a great name, Etoch.
Etoch, yeah, I've never heard that before. But to me, that sounds like it sounds almost as posh as Molyneux Hetherington.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the obscurity of Etok gives it extra posh points, right?
Yeah, maybe he's got the edge there.
And Henry, one of those sneaky posh names, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't necessarily feel inherently posh, but it actually is a very posh name.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are calling their kids Henry these days, I think.
After the Hoover.
After
a cultural icon, but yeah. Unfortunately, come the revolution, Henry the Hoover will be up against the wall.
For sucking, is that?
Oh, terrible, terrible. That's almost as bad as his jokes. Anything else you want to add to that, or should we take a break and go to Saint of the Week?
No, let's do it.
Saint of the Week.
Saint of the Week. We are talking about reform, so I thought we should talk about their favourite saint, St. George. St. George is, of course, the patron saint of England. What St. George is not, really, is this week's Saint of the Week. But bear with me on this. St. George is a Roman soldier, 3rd century AD.
Heresy! Remove this filth!
For being a Roman soldier? Yes. His dad is usually considered to be from Turkey, from Cappadocia, but his mum was a Palestinian from Lydda, which is now Lod in Israel.
No.
No?
That might be what it's called. They might say that it's called Lod, and it's in Israel.
Right, okay, I'm with you.
It's in occupied Palestine.
Yes, sure, right. I'm taking a lot of this from a particular BBC article, so yeah.
Yeah. I suppose I have to also say then that technically his dad wasn't from Turkey then.
He's from occupied Cappadocia. So he's kind of half Palestinian by birth, and it is said that he lived in a place called Al-Qadar near Bethlehem, where his mother is from. St. George, most famous, of course, for killing a dragon. He kills a dragon, saves a bunch of kind of townsfolk, and the leader of the town offers him money to say thank you for killing the dragon. And St. George says, no, I won't take your money, go and give it to the poor instead. And according to the story, the whole town is so impressed by this that they kind of convert to Christianity based on his generosity. Worth noting here that the rules of Saint of the Week are that we take a kind of extreme credulity approach. So, as far as we're concerned, in Saint of the Week, this all definitely happened. This is going to get a little bit confusing because we're going to be dealing with multiple iterations of this legend, but it all basically happened. That's our approach in Saint of the Week. So he definitely killed the dragon.
I feel like Saint of the Week for us, we're doing with the saints what conservative evangelicals do with the Bible, and just trying to harmonise everything.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, there's no inconsistency in any of the tradition around saints. We're happy with the inconsistency in the Bible, but not around the saints.
That is a hard line for us.
Yeah. So he's famous for giving away his possessions, remaining true to his religion, but he's also actually quite beloved in Palestine. Loads of churches, the St. George's churches in Palestine, and on the 6th of May, which is St. George's Day in Palestine, there's a service held for him. Loads of worshippers come from quite a way, actually, light candles, say prayers, and special bread is baked that shows him in his typical pose as a dragon slayer. There's a quote here from someone in Palestine. He's presented as a knight full of peace and grace, riding his horse and always fighting evil, which is symbolised by the dragon. We believe that St. George will help us when we need him. If you have an accident, the first thing you say is Yakidia, which means we're calling for St. George to help us. There's a Greek Orthodox archbishop called Attila Hanna, who said, we believe he was a great martyr for his faith, who defended the Christian faith and values. By making sacrifices to his faith, he was able to defeat evil. We take St. George as a patron for the people living here. As he was born in historic Palestine, we pray to him to remember us and this holy land. Some cool traditions from here. Letters asking St. George to solve family disputes are placed inside the glass that covers his icon. And people appealing to the saint for help also give sheep to the church so that the church can distribute kind of meat to the poor from that sheep. So that's kind of cool. So a slightly more fun way of seeing St. George than the kind of traditional nationalist version we got over here. But I want to go one step further because actually Palestinian Muslims, especially those from Al-Qadr, also follow some of the practices. And Father Anias in Palestine says it's not only the Christians that appreciate him, the Muslims also feel the power and the miracles of St. George. You'll remember earlier that the guy said Yakadir means calling for St. George to help us. And actually the Saint's Day in Bethlehem is for Saint Al-Aqadir, or Qadir. And Qadir is an Islamic folk figure that is associated with St. George. The relationship's a bit complicated, varies in different traditions, but they're often ultimately seen as the same person. So in the Druze faith, Al-Qadir is Elijah, and he is then reincarnated as John the Baptist and St. George, which actually is quite, to be Elijah and John the Baptist, this is a big deal. Actually, that puts St. George very high in the importance in the Druze faith. Druze see St. George and Al-Qadir as a special protector of the Druze people, a healer and a symbol of their enduring faith and resilience. To the Druze, the story of St. George slaying the dragon is allegorically interpreted, and it represents the triumph of good over evil and the protection of the faithful from harm. If we take the Muslim version of Qadir, it probably means something like the green one or the verdant one, and he is super associated with life. Apparently he gets his name because a patch of barren ground he stood on for a while becomes green with grass. So he is someone who brings life. Just by standing somewhere, he's able to bring life. There are stories of him causing trees to sprout, flowers to bloom from pillars. He even resurrects the dead. And in fact, he himself is actually tortured multiple times to death for his commitment to Christianity, but keeps bringing back to life. In one version of the story, he literally only dies because he completes his mission and prays to God to ask to be allowed to be released from an earthly service. The only way of actually killing him is by God specially intervening, because Qadir is so full of life that he always keeps coming back. One time they tried to starve him, but instead someone brings him a dry piece of wood, and as soon as he touches it, it immediately grows a bunch of fruit and veg, which he eats to survive. So that is my Saint of the Week, is the Qadir version of St. George. Not the horrible nationalist version that's all militaristic and fights the Romans and
murders a dragon.
Yeah. None of that, the bad stuff. Although, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I agree with you on one level, but also killing a dragon is inherently cool, so that does... Yeah, I'm torn.
I think it's cooler to be eaten by a dragon.
Yeah, arguably. Anyway, the key thing is that the Qadir version of St. George is much better. He is a saint who is a protector and benefactor to multiple religions and ethnicities, someone who's concerned with care for the poor, committed to refusing wealth for himself. Qadir is teeming with life and the bounty of creation. He's so full of life, he can't even stay dead. Nature bursts to life just from being in his presence. He bravely fights evil to protect others rather than for personal gain. And so, all in all, I think the Qadir version of St. George is the superior St. George, and therefore your saint of the week this week is St. George, brackets, Qadir's version.
Okay, that might be the most confusing saint of the week we've ever had.
It's basically St. George, but I want to make it very clear that it's not St. George who wants to, capsize boats in the channel.
hang on. This is saint of the week, so it must be him as well.
What do you mean, sorry?
Well, we have agreed that every version of a person is canon.
Okay. So, but the emphasis we're putting on this particular St. George is more the life-giving. In fact, what I'd say is it's the proper St. George as exemplified in Kadir, not the fake St. George that isn't from the Christian tradition.
No, that's not.
No, it's not. It's not actual St. George. It's fake St. George that the Reform lot use. That's my argument. And the reason I want to do that actually is because there was a simple version of doing this that was just like, well, it was Palestinian and Turkish, and it never even came to the UK. And I just find that the argument, oh, you love St. George, but he's actually Palestinian, I think to be a bit simplistic and almost playing into the narratives of the right in a way that's unhelpful. But I thought it was potentially interesting to see how St. George is viewed and understood in kind of other cultures. I hope that is a more helpful way of kind of maybe reclaiming St. George a little bit than just the overly simplistic, well, actually, he was Palestinian.
Yeah, okay, fine, I'll allow it. I'm not convinced by everything you've said there, Ben, but I think I do like that version. I like the sort of life-givingness of it, as you say. I like the sort of flowers sprouting and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's kind of some really cool photos of him. Oh, not photos. Some illustrations of him.
That would be a miracle.
yeah. Illustrations
Hallelujah.
of him. And just stuff sprouting around him and everything full of life. And I thought that was really cool. And potentially if you're going to claim the mantle of St. George, then actually what you are trying to do with his name must be something that is life-bringing.
Fair enough.
What a lovely, positive time we've just spent. We want to get back into the mire.
Yay! Okay, so for the second half, I wanted to start it off by going back to talk about living in love and faith.
Okay.
And arguably, if we were actually good at podcasting, we would have started it this way, but we're not. Well, I'm certainly not. And you're not either, let's be honest.
I'm actually brilliant, so...
So basically in 2023, this is where a lot of this living in love and faith stuff was really coming to a head, and certain churches in the Church of England were very unhappy with the direction that they saw the church taking, and a few bishops wrote a series of affirmations. And this church in particular, but other churches as well, so a bunch of churches decided they were still in the Church of England, but they had what they called an impaired fellowship with the Church of England because they believed that the Church of England was moving away from orthodoxy. Okay, so St. Michael's Cornhill, to give you a bit more background on it, is one of these churches that decided that living in love and faith was a bad thing, and the church was moving away from orthodoxy, and they were in a state of impaired fellowship with the Church of England, and they have put this on their website very clearly and linked to this series of affirmations. So they want to make it very clear to you that they do not want to be an inclusive church.
You shock me.
But I think this is the thing, right? So you've got a church that is in the middle of the city of London.
Yeah.
That is a kind of prayer book society, kind of traditional evangelical Church of England church that is also deeply committed to not being inclusive to the point where it's put that on its website with a link to these affirmations. So this is the kind of place that we're dealing with. So I wonder whether, potentially earlier when we were having that discussion about the choir, why are there so few members? Maybe, you had one idea about that, I had another. Maybe actually neither of us are correct. Well, maybe I'm leaning towards you being correct.
Well, there's something interesting. There's kind of a spectrum of inclusiveness in terms of at one end you've got the kind of very vocally inclusive. At the other end, you've got the very vocally not inclusive. But the vast majority of Anglican churches fit somewhere in between those two poles, and you've got, the classic is the places where the leadership is anti-gay, anti-inclusion, doesn't really talk about it much, and the actual congregation is actually got a variety of different perspectives on it, right? And that, I think, is a fairly common situation.
Yeah.
These guys are right on the far end of the spectrum. Yeah. Right? If they are specifically announcing that they're in paired fellowship with the Church of England over this stuff, that is, as kind of clearly, publicly anti-inclusive. I'm certain they have preached directly from the pulpit against homosexuality.
Oh, well, yeah, I'd be absolutely surprised if they hadn't.
Yeah. That is what we're dealing with here. And I find that very interesting in the context of Farage and Reform. Because there are these kind of dual impulses. You have the Farage side of things, where I think Farage doesn't give a shit about gay people either way, right? I imagine Farage has probably even got some friends that are gay, right? He's not as interested in a lot of that side of stuff, and is much more interested in kind of pushing his stats right politics. And he does have some cultural issues he's interested in, but they're not fundamentally his big thing, right? But there is this alternative impulse, or kind of contradictory impulse, where the culture war stuff is the stuff for Reform, right? And I think you're seeing this, and I think that is why ultimately a lot of people are worried about Reform winning the next election. I'm not, because I think those contradictory impulses will scupper it to the point where it's so associated with this sort of stuff that most people find repugnant, that although they will absolutely gain victories, I'm more concerned about the impact they'll have on other parties than I am about them winning power across the country for themselves.
I mean, I don't know how much I agree with you on that. I think what you're sort of outlining is one potential eventuality, but I think we have to be really careful about assuming that this stuff isn't going to happen, because obviously fascism can take root anywhere, and so much of this is going to depend on how much Reform can control the media narrative, how much they can control what's being put out there, how much they can insert culture war issues into the mainstream, which we're seeing a lot more of. They're having a lot more success doing that.
I agree completely with all of that. I just think ultimately they are viewed as a party as too toxic by too many people to be able to win an outright majority in the country. I think what is more likely is that other parties, quote-unquote mainstream parties, respond to the pressure Reform is putting on them by adopting their policies, and that this sounds crazy, but I think we're more likely to have a fascist government from the Tory party than we are from Reform. Maybe.
I mean, it's tricky, because I think there is an argument to say, well, there are going to be people who will never vote for them. I just am not convinced. Like, I think what we've seen over the last, 8 years or so, 10 years, something like that, is that people who would never have dreamt of voting for these kinds of people previously. And actually, we were talking about a group of these people, about 10, 15 minutes ago. You look at your kind of hippie adjacent folks.
Yeah, true.
And they have really been turned. I know people who they were loveliest, fluffiest liberals, and they had a bit of kind of some wooey ideas or whatever, but like you wouldn't imagine that they would turn fascist, and basically that's where they've ended up. And I think that follows the pattern of fascism whenever it rears its head, is you get these people who are perfectly lovely, well-meaning people who end up down that route as well. And I just think I hope you're right, but I also think it's a lot easier for fascist movements to make themselves palatable to people who are essentially, they don't have a particularly critical understanding of politics and society, and so they can end up being turned.
And I think it's clear that is what reform is trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
And, bluntly, Nigel Farage is, for all the terrible things he is, probably the most impressive politician of his generation in terms of the achievements that he has achieved, or almost all of which are extremely negative.
I'm sorry. I think you are ignoring Nadine Dorries again.
You're right. I apologise. But genuinely, if he thinks it might work, I think we have to take it seriously. So I don't want to sound dismissive of it. My bet is still that the electoral system will not pay off for them, but that they will have far more influence you never want them to have. What I find interesting is that I think if they are trying to appeal to a broader audience, as they clearly are, it's interesting that this is the sort of church they choose to come to, because there'll be a lot of people that are very open to reform, but also have gay mates, right?
Yeah, but I mean, most people aren't looking that deeply at this, right? Because the way Christianity obviously functions for these people is about tradition, right? So they associate Christianity with this sort of mythical past of what Britain was and still has some remnants of, but has lost and should return to again. And this is one of the biggest things that gets me annoyed is people associating Christianity essentially purely and simply with an essentially nationalistic tradition, because that's not what it was ever meant to be.
So do you think there's almost an element of them relying on the people who care about this stuff will be noticing that this is the church they've gone to and this is who they're associating with, but the majority of people who aren't interested in this stuff, it just won't have an impact on their view of reform?
I mean, I think if you're the kind of person who does notice this kind of thing,
either you're already sold on reform, or
you're politically aware.
Yeah. Either you're never going to vote for them, or you're completely on board already. Yeah. Which one are you? Remind me.
So, Uncle Nige, as I call him, is I'm a big fan. And,
yeah, it started with me calling him an oppressive politician on an amoral basis, and now we're this is the start of our 2026 reform pivot.
Yeah, maybe not. Shall we move on, though, because we've got a few more things to get through.
Things can only get better. Yes, we can. Take back control. Over-promising. Under-delivering. It seems to be one of the constant of contemporary politics. Friends, Advent is different. For the hope on offer, it looks back to when God rolled up his sleeves and entered our world under the shadow of death. Political, economic policy is critical, which is why what you represent is so important for our nation, to have different parties thinking hard about the economy and politics. But friends, no matter what you might think, they will never get to the core of what is wrong with our world. Adam lay bound by sin and shame. The birth of this child promises a new humanity, yes, fully human, born of Mary, but not of Adam's line, enslaved to sin, but born of the Spirit.
It's almost like a classic evangelical line there of we're above the world of politics. But at the same time, you're committing your church to a specific vision of politics. it almost felt actively contradictory what he was saying.
Yeah.
He was clearly trying to thread something very subtle down the middle there of not wanting to give up that kind of focus on things above the earthly realm.
There's almost a kind of liberal thing there of, when he says that's why it's so important what you're doing, thinking differently and so on. Like, he's doing that classic thing that you see a lot in evangelicalism in particular, but not exclusively, of thinking, well, essentially, as long as Christians are in power, it doesn't really matter what party they are. It doesn't matter what their politics are, because they're bringing Christ to the public arena. And that, of course, is bollocks, because anyone can claim to be Christian. Anyone can claim to be bringing Christ to the nation, or whatever it may be, however you might like to frame it. That doesn't make that true, and it doesn't make it a positive thing for people in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's strange in some ways, the language uses there about it's important to have all sorts of different parties considering stuff. It's kind of, it feels like he's past that point when he's actually having the Reformed Christian Fellowship launched in his church. He's not just going, that kind of classic liberal thing of we need to have. That is the argument you hear from someone who is like, well, we want to hear from all different parties, everyone's different vision. It's
but
important
it feels
for us
like
together. And it's like, but mate, you've picked a party, you've picked a side.
Yeah. But it feels like he's kind of implicitly using that line as a justification for having them in his church.
Yeah. There's something quite defensive about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very
anyway,
odd.
Shall we move on?
And so in this season of Advent, let me ask us all, have you ever read one of the eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus? The best-selling book of all time. Have you actually read it? No doubt there'll be some here unwilling. On the basis of reason. Too many miracles. Unscientific. Irrational. But surely belief in a creator God is the very reason that science works. As somebody once put it, Christians believe in the virgin birth of Jesus. Atheists believe in the virgin birth of the universe. Which miracle? You choose. Friends, please don't cancel the virgin birth on account of it being irrational. For a God who made everything out of nothing, surely it's not too far-fetched to think he could make a baby without a human father. We would love you to take one of these gospel accounts away with you today as a gift from St. Michael's. But you may be thinking it's irrational. Really? Or maybe you're someone here today thinking you'd like to take it seriously, but you worry that God wouldn't take you seriously. If God really exists, well, he would be surely like a furious online commentator, poised to expose you with a series of incriminating screenshots.
Fair play to him knowing his audience and being like, I get why you're scared. There's a bunch of really incriminating shit about all of you out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating that we get a evangelical altar call, essentially, in the midst of this. That is not at all where I saw this going.
It is very rooted in that evangelical element of the altar call as well, because, he starts it off with not a lie, but something that just isn't true. Have you read one of the eyewitness accounts?
I certainly
no,
haven't.
because they don't exist.
Yeah. Exactly. None of the Gospels are eyewitness accounts. There is some claim that eyewitness testimony was involved in the creation of was utilised in the creation of the Gospels, but
the people who wrote them were not eyewitnesses,
and nor do they claim to be.
No,
there is not. Yeah, there's not a claim to an eyewitness status for any of the Gospels. I found it quite old-fashioned. Not like, but like it felt like evangelicalism for 15 years ago, right? He's still doing the fight against new atheists, rationality. Here's the gospel to take with you. Maybe just try it. I don't know.
That probably just shows you like the age of the people in the congregation. To be honest,
but it's not actually that a kind of 2025, which is when this was way of approaching kind of evangelization of people. Like this is, it's a very 2010 approach, I would say.
You know what's interesting as well? He, I don't think, so we see towards the end of this clip, he waves around a copy of Luke. And I find it interesting that it's Luke that he goes for, because you'd expect normally these people, John, maybe Mark. But Luke is not necessarily the gospel you would go for if you are trying to convince people of a theological position.
Okay, so the reason it's not John is there's this focus on rationality in it, right? Like, and John is, this is not I'm not having to go at John, but it's a much more mystical gospel. It's not a rational one. Thing about Luke is, it's, you know, I've heard it referred to as Dr. Luke, right? Like, and you know, the idea
it's definitely
that it's
appealing
like
to that kind of
that this was the rational guy who went to get to the bottom of what actually happened, and that's his account, which I don't think is actually a particularly accurate understanding of that gospel, but that is the idea there. So I'm not as surprised by you that it's Luke they've gone for.
But I mean, I really like the Gospel of Luke, so that'd often be the one that I went with. But partly because there's a lot of radical stuff in Luke.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can see why he went with it, but it's also the longest gospel. Anyway, shall we're running out of time, so shall we move swiftly
on to the penultimate one?
Many of us here are Christians. I hope so, if it's the launch of the Christian Fellowship. These weeks should be a time of great celebration for us. The arrival of one who got cancelled for mixing with certain people. One who came that God and sinners may be reconciled. One who came not to cancel humanity, but to be cancelled in our place.
A lot of stuff there about cancelling, eh? He's really big on cancelling.
Yeah.
The one who came not to cancel us, but to be cancelled in our place.
What
are you talking about?
I love that so much.
What is going through your head, my dude? That's what he said.
Yeah, he definitely had a thread throughout this sermon, didn't he? And he hung on to it for dear life.
Do you know when you get like a kid who like hears a new word?
Yeah.
And they become a bit obsessed with it, but they don't really grasp what it means. That's what it feels like with him in cancellation, right? I really enjoy after the bit we just saw as well, after him like doing his big altar call, being like, "But I assume most of us here are Christians." Like, what? Did you just try to convert everyone? Was that just an instinct that you were just instinctively going to start and convert everyone?
It's just a sort of reactive kind of like.
Yeah. Very strange. But yeah, the whole cancellation metaphor. Cancelled for hanging out with the wrong people as well. Again, I assume that he's almost doing that kind of defensive thing of being like, well, Jesus was also told he shouldn't hang out with the wrong people, but it wasn't fascists Jesus was hanging out with, right? Yeah. Like, it was the last, the least, and the lost. Like,
but also though, like Jesus at multiple points, his life was at risk to the point where he lost his life later on, right? And when someone is cancelled, they don't lose their life. Like, the very, very worst that will happen is that, like, some people will say mean things about them on the internet, and some of them might, if this person is awful enough, call their job, like their boss, and let their boss know the awful stuff that they've been doing. And some of those people might lose their job as a result of that. Like, and that's not a nice thing to happen to someone.
No.
Right? It's not, it's just, take it from me. Like, losing your job is not fun. Although I have far less sympathy when it happens to fascists. Of course.
Yeah.
But not everyone it has happened to is a fascist, and I can appreciate that. But that is not the same thing as being executed or, being at the hands of a baying mob who want to kill you.
Yeah. And I just think, actually, I think there are, I don't know to use the word cancelling, but there are things that have happened to people that were they faced consequences for things they said or did that they shouldn't have faced. That there are things that happened that were bad. But that is not going to happen to this guy. There are consequences he should face, and he will not be facing them. Right? Like that.
Well, except Bread and Rosary's podcast is forcing him to face up to his.
Well, if only we had that sort of power, eh? That would be nice. But I
don't know if it would.
Well, I don't know. Imagine if he heard this and he repented. I mean,
well, yeah, sure, but
or did something else. I don't know.
I'm not sure we would be helping him to repent. I mean, I hope he does, but
yeah. Fingers crossed. Should we watch the next one?
Yeah, so we're moving on to the prayers now.
No.
So they're not very long, so we should be okay.
We pray this Christmas for all those in our armed forces serving overseas, protecting our country. Might you grant to them the peace that only Jesus, our Prince of Peace, can bring. And may they, though far from home, know the comfort of your love this Christmas.
Sorry, no. You either pray for the armed forces or you play the Prince of Peace card. Like, that's a one or the other situation.
But I think this is the reason I put this in. Actually, was that there is a kind of cognitive dissonance that happens there for quite a lot of people, not just reform types, where they genuinely see the British military in particular, and I'm sure this happens in other countries with their militaries as well, but the British military in particular is there to bring peace. It's a Pax Romana kind of way of seeing things, peace through sword, peace through war. And you obviously have to question how much these people actually want peace, but it's a kind of British exceptionalism where our army must be the best, most moral thing in the world because we're British and we are moral. We are not savages. We are not monsters. Those people over there are. It's a frustrating thing that they can't see that there are people a lot like them saying exactly the same thing in other places about their armies.
And I think there's something about it's so obvious, and it's like I don't know. I feel almost a bit silly pointing it out, but like, how can they be in foreign countries and protecting this country? Like if an armed force is protecting its country, it kind of needs to be in its country to do that. Like, that's kind of the definition of, like, and what they mean is protecting the interests of this country, which is a much more nebulous and hard to define thing. But what he actually said was that the protecting the country while serving overseas. And it's like, well, no. By the meaning of protecting their country, they can only be protecting their country by being in the country. It means protecting the country's interests, and yeah.
Well, and of course, when we say protecting the country's interests, we don't actually mean the interests, by and large, of the average person in this country.
No, of course not.
We mean the interests of those with money and power, ultimately.
The people that matter, yes.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
But actually, it's more than that. Well, it is that, but it's the country as a concept, not as actual human beings, right? It's the interest of the country as some sort of national project.
Shall we move on? Last one.
And finally, we pray for our King and the whole royal family, that this Christmas they will know for themselves the King of the world, born in a manger, and might they lay down their crowns before him.
What?
So I did not expect this service to take an anti-monarchy position at the end. He means that the monarchy should not exist anymore. That's what I've taken from it.
Genuinely, that's the surface reading of what he's just said. Like, my mind is blown. Maybe I'm going to vote reform.
Well, look, obviously he's alluding to a scene, I think, from the Book of Revelation, right? Where all the kings of the world lay down their crowns at the feet of Christ, I think.
Which, again, by the way, I would read as anti-monarchist. But...
But it's interesting because when he got to this bit, like, my first thing is like, oh yeah, here we go. Got to get the royal family in there, the king and all the rest of it, haven't we? But then I was like, pleasantly surprised. So,
I think it's fair to say that he doesn't mean what he said there, right?
Yeah.
And no one there. It's fascinating because you can almost. There's enough of the structure of one of those traditional prayers, and we all know that you're not really paying attention in church. Like, no one pays full attention in church. That everyone there just heard him pray that the king would be a good, nice king, and that, he'd be having a nice time at Christmas. Right? Like, the structure of, okay, this is the prayer for the royal family, I know what this one's going to be, means that actually people don't pick up on the fact that he essentially accidentally just called for the abolition of the monarchy. Also, just, I know it's churlish to point out, but when you pray for the whole royal family, you are praying for Prince Andrew. Like...
No, to be fair, he does need prayer.
Yeah.
Maybe not that kind of...
Yeah. Last rights of preference, but... Well, that was an experience, Adam. I feel worse for having watched the small amount of it you sent to me. I can't imagine how you feel having watched it 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of weird kind of enjoyment I often get out of doing this kind of thing.
Something deeply Freudian.
You know, like when you have like it's a hate watch, you know?
Yeah. I found that far more fascinating than I was expecting, in that there were a lot of points where I just didn't get what I was expecting from it. And there's something to be said about the way reform exposes the inherent weirdness of a lot of this kind of thinking. You know, when we did that one on the National Conservatism conference, it was really bad, but it was bad in a way that was kind of like, I kind of knew roughly what we were getting. Whereas this was a lot more off the wall. Maybe it was less tightly controlled. Maybe it's just that the people doing it are not the A-team. I'm not sure. But a lot more of the weirdness really seeping through in what they were doing there.
Which, you know, all I'm going to say about that is...
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
We're going to have to take the soundboard off you, aren't we?
Nope. No, but in all seriousness, though, like, that is the way we do politics in this country. And you're going to get some of that weirdness come through eventually if you keep allowing that kind of shit to go further and further down that road. So, like, you know, even 5 years ago, but, you know, 5-10 years ago, I was having arguments with people about not letting fascists, as many of us were, about platforming fascists and how that leads to this kind of thing and leads to worse, you know. And, like, hate to say, I fucking told you so.
Yeah, Christ.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, sunlight's the best disinfectant. Let me know how that's fucking gone, eh?
I think it's you know, Helena from like No Justice MTG. I don't know if you come across. She's I think she's a Novara contributor, but she has her own channel in her own right where she just analyzes politics. And one of the things that she says quite a lot is that being a leftist, particularly in this country, but being a leftist is just being right 2 years too early.
Yes, I've heard that phrase before, and there is something to be said to that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that
probably does us for this episode. It's been a bumper episode. Happy New Year, everyone. We are back from our Christmas break. We have a slightly different release schedule planned for 2026. We are planning to go to a 2-a-month release model rather than every 2 weeks, which enables us to plan a little bit further in advance, hopefully. So,
is 2 a month not just every 2 weeks?
No, because some months are 5 weeks long. So it is
barely.
If we do 2 a month, we release 24 episodes. If we do once every 2 weeks, we do 26 episodes.
I mean, look, Ben, let's be honest. We've never been exactly consistent anyway, have we?
2025, most consistent year on record for Ben and Rosaries. But for those of you who set your clock by release schedule, we're moving to a 2 a month, which for most of you will almost no difference. But you might notice a slight change in the schedule. But otherwise, very happy to be back. Very excited for what 2026 will bring. Probably, more horrible fascist shit. But hey, we'll do what we can. If you want to help us keep going, throw some pennies our way. We have a Patreon. You can find all the details of that on breadandrosaries.com. You can also find our contact details on that website. We would love to hear from people, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, all very welcome. Adam, where in the world can people find you?
You can find me most places at CommieXIAN.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. And we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.
See you later.